Hello and welcome back to the Hands on IT podcast. As always, I'm your host, Landon Miles. Now, this podcast is a part of the Automox Autonomous IT podcast network, and you can look for new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday. So, from the latest in vulnerabilities, cybersecurity to everything IT, the Autonomous IT podcast network has something for you. So, this month we've been discussing how Automox uses Automox. Now, my use cases are a little bit different than most of our customers and most everyone else at Automox, but I think it's pretty interesting, and we're going to discuss it today. So we have a great show lined up for you today, and there's a lot of stuff to discuss. So when I started at Automox, I needed a way to play with the software at scale, but without messing up anyone else's workflow or their devices. So for me, the quickest way to learn something is to get in there, play with it, push some buttons, and figure out how it works. So I turned to virtualization. Now, for those unfamiliar with virtualization is a technology that allows you to create simulated environments or virtual machines on a single physical hardware system. So this enables multiple operating systems and applications to run independently on the same hardware. So you can have a computer running 10 or so operating systems independently all at the same time. Now, by using virtualization, you can optimize resources utilization, reduce costs, and increase flexibility and scalability. But in my case, leveraging virtualization meant that I could experiment with the Automox platform in isolated environments without impacting anyone else. So I really enjoy repurposing old hardware, but this same thing could be done in your cloud provider of choice, whether that's AWS, Azure, Linode, DigitalOcean, or the like. But the only purpose of these virtual machines was to run the Automox agent and create demos for, well, you, my dear listener, and those are at discover.automox.com if you want to check those out. But now, like every scroungy IT professional, I asked our IT department for some used hardware, loaded up Proxmox, created a cluster, and away we went. So Proxmox is a Debian Linux-based operating system specifically designed for virtualization. It provides robust and flexible environments for managing virtual machines and containers very easily. It has a web interface, and it leverages the KVM hypervisor for full virtualization. So in the industry side of things, it allows you to efficiently scale and manage your resources. For me, it allowed me to turn a few computers into 70 and potentially more, actually, but 70 is the sweet spot before my office gets too hot. So Proxmox, as we said, offers an easy to use web interface, and it makes it straightforward to handle complex virtualization tasks, backups, live migrations, clustering. Again, I don't really need any of that. I just needed a bunch of virtual machines. And since they are doing nothing except being used in a demo environment, I didn't really feel good about paying a monthly cloud subscription for that. So now I have around 70 or so endpoints within the Automox console that I can play with, create worklets for, and help create demos that addresses pain points of our customers or anyone else that's using the software. Now, the next area I use Automox is on my family's devices. Now, like most IT professionals that I know, I've been the go-to IT person for my family and friends for about as long as I can remember. Now, no matter how many times I tell them to update, most of the time helping them was spent babysitting operating system updates, waiting for them to download, or updating their software. Now, as a disclaimer, I do get Automox for free since I'm an employee there, but this has been such a quality of life upgrade that I would 100% pay for it. Now, with my family's devices all connected to Automox, I can easily make sure that they're up to date with the latest security patches. No more sending that, hey, you should probably update your computer text that we kind of get scared about in IT because we're so much more up to date on vulnerabilities than the common person. But this is especially important for those family members who may not be as tech savvy or tend to neglect regular updates. It's an additional peace of mind for the kiddos' laptops, family laptops, parents, or anyone else that calls you regularly for IT support. Now, the third and final place that I use Automox is in my home lab. So I'm a nerd, not necessarily your comic book type of nerd, not that these can't coexist, but I'm a home server nerd. It started out as a project in COVID when we were kind of all stuck at home. And as those things typically go, it exploded from there. It's fun, useful, great way to fill up my time, solve problems. And a lot of times I don't have as much time as I'd like to manage this system, make sure it's all up to date, everything is good. And instead of applying updates whenever I have time, I added that server to Automox and away we went. So my home lab is pretty humble. It's just a used 1 liter PC that I bought off eBay because someone thought it was broken. Now, in the picture of the eBay listing, they had the monitor connected to the wrong output. This 1 liter PC had a graphics card and definitely wasn't plugged in correctly. Pro tips here. So I ordered it, got it working, and I run a handful of things on there that my family uses all the time. It's a media server, a file server, home automation hub, and I even have a recipe app that my wife really likes. Shout out to Mealy if you're looking for that. But automating patching and configuration and updates leaves a lot more time for the fun stuff, a lot more peace of mind if I'm away or if something's gone awry that needs to be updated, there's a vulnerability out there. It's just added a lot of peace of mind. Now, if you ever decide to start into the home server hobby, you will quickly find people that have way cooler home labs than you do. So naturally, this transitions perfectly into our guest this week, Anthony Maxwell. All right. Hello, Anthony, and welcome to the Hands-on IT podcast.
Hey, awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you give us a quick introduction of who you are, a bit about your background, your role at Automox, and kind of how you ended up in software engineering, I guess?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So Anthony Maxwell, software engineer here at Automox. Interestingly enough, my background is in more in the IT ops space. So I've got a background in once upon a time, I did a lot of systems and network architecture. Spent a brief time doing some stuff like, implemented cybersecurity programs, things of that nature, technology strategy, stuff like that. So ultimately, though, I kind of fell out of love with the space. I did it and loved what I was doing for a very long time. Just got to a point though where the charm wasn't in it for me anymore.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd kind of been writing software as a hobby for, nearly, I guess, just about 20 years now.
Nice.
Yeah, so coming out of that, I was like, this feels like a natural evolution. It's always been something I've loved doing. Let's take a shot at that.
Oh, nice. Well, very cool. So one of the reasons that I asked you to come on, and I told you this, we've been talking about virtualization and home labs a little bit in the podcast. And so with home labs, there's always someone that has a cooler home lab than you, and you're the person with the coolest home lab that I know of. So I thought I'd have you on. But yeah, you want to give us a quick little introduction about your home lab, the server infrastructure that you maintain personally?
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to keep it brief because it's a hefty stack. So I've got a 4U Dell R720 XD server that's got a PERC H730P RAID controller in it. So it's got two 32 core Xeons, 256 gigs of RAM, 10 gig networking card. That's a 4-port 10 gig card in there. Running Proxmox virtual environment right now. So that's like the server side of things. In terms of the storage in that box, though, actually, it's all flash storage running on that physical RAID controller. So I've got there's 2 onboard SD cards that run in RAID 1. Those host the Proxmox operating system. And then I've got on that physical PERC 730p controller, I've got a RAID 10 array of all flash storage, and that's where VMs live and all that stuff. And then aside from that, I've got just a little Synology DS920 Plus NAS, just kind of used for cold storage, backup storage, stuff like that. And then I'm actually using an FS.com switch, which I guarantee nobody's ever heard of, but it was a 10 gig capable 10 gig capable switch with redundant power supplies that I got for like $300, and that kind of blew me away. So that's kind of the high level of the stack I got going on.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a pretty solid deal. So
yeah, it's a great deal.
So can you share some of like the favorite projects you've deployed in your home lab?
Oh, favorite projects. It's interesting. Man, favorite project. You know what? I think. Oh, this is a tough one. I saw the easiest one I can think of off the top is I did deploy Vault Warden on there.
Yeah.
Which for anybody out there that's unfamiliar, Vault Warden is it's a Rust implementation of Bitwarden. So super small memory footprint, super lightweight, super quick and responsive. I deployed that on my home stack. That was a blast. Um, Honestly, I think my favorite project I rolled out on there though was within the Proxmox virtual environment. I stood up 3 VMs that I allocated the host resources to, like 33, 33, 33, sliced it 3 ways and allocated it to each of the 3 VMs. And then on each of the 3 VMs, I installed Docker, put them in Docker Swarm mode, and then use Gluster FS to do clustered storage between the 3 nodes that replicates with like a RAF consensus algorithm. So
Yeah.
you get real time storage synchronization between your three VMs there. And I ran that in a Docker Swarm with Traffic, which
Very cool.
Traffic is awesome in and of itself, right? It's a reverse proxy solution that
Yeah. Yeah.
has support for like Docker labels. So I can spin up containers, right, and slap a label on it that says expect it at this host name, and it
Mhm.
automatically generates an SSL cert through Let's Encrypt for that host name, takes the port from the label, routes traffic across the internal Docker Swarm overlay routing mesh to hit the container across an encrypted
Nice.
virtual network.
Yeah. So one of my favorite things about my home lab is that it's just a place to be able to mess around. And so,
Sure.
yeah, it's kind of it's like, oh, I've been doing this at work. I want to try it this way. Or like, what happens if I push this button? And it's a way that you can kind of just do that, learn and figure out what happens if you push the buttons with no consequences. So,
Yeah.
but so with that, is there anything that you kind of learned within your home lab that you've gotten to use kind of within your either of your jobs, whether it was in kind of the IT infrastructure side of things or software engineering?
So, interestingly enough, I think the biggest thing that I've used a ton is I hosted my own self-hosted GitHub Actions runners on that Proxmox virtual environment.
Yeah.
Um, and I used that as a guinea pig area for all kinds of stuff that I didn't even know it at the time that I would ever need it, within the scope of what I'm doing today at Automox. But I was doing all kinds of work and exploiting the heck out of how I could use GitHub Actions, with those self-hosted runners for all kinds of tasks, ranging from continuous delivery to various CI testing in an environment that replicated where I wanted these things to run in. And lo and behold, I would then later become involved in an internal project at Automox to migrate everything to GitHub Actions. So here we are.
Nice. Very
Value
cool.
came back around.
It sure does. Sure does. At least that's what I try to sell it to my family on. So, like, this is important.
Yep.
So, yeah. Well, let's see. And then, so I guess since this is Automox, do you use Automox in your home lab or kind of? Yeah, I think you've mentioned before that you used Automox. You were a customer of Automox before you joined Automox. So if you
I
want to,
was.
can you give us a little bit of insight on that and how you used or still use Automox within your server environments and in your home lab?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, before I came to Automox, I was an independent IT consultant. Again, mainly doing things like technology strategy, cybersecurity programming, things of that nature, right? So in that role, I had basically all kinds of paperwork agreements I would establish between myself and my clients in terms of um, yeah, my own cybersecurity policy, for example. Um, there were a number of agreements that were typically involved in order to interact with and contract with these customers. And I used Automox to automate policy compliance for that stuff across the board, right? So basically, everything that I defined that I was doing, in my written cybersecurity policies. A
Yeah.
lot of my cybersecurity policy stuff adhered to a lot of CIS benchmarking criteria. So I basically automated all of that through Automox workloads.
Ah, very cool.
Yep.
Very
And then
cool.
patching, of course.
Yeah, that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then so um, I always like to ask this question when I'm talking to people about their home labs: is does your family know that they're using your home lab?
Do they know that they're using it? Yes. Do they know to the extent that they're using it? I guarantee you, no, definitely not.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice. So, yeah, and from the home assistant automations and everything else, it's try to keep that, yeah, keep the family approval factor up, and that's it's always the trick. So
that's it.
it's like, hey,
That's
this
it.
light turned on when I walked in here. It's like, yeah, it sure did. So,
Uh huh.
but,
Notice how you got
yeah,
no ads when you're out there browsing around on your cell phone?
yeah, that's the hey, why can't I click on this ad that gets me too sometimes? But
Yeah,
like
I
if there
bumped
was
into
an
that one a
ad,
couple
so
times.
yeah,
Yeah. Uh huh.
yeah. But it's like maybe you shouldn't be clicking on that ad, and that doesn't ever get me into a good spot either. But
Yeah. Right. Right.
yeah, so can you provide some advice for any of our listeners that may be interested in getting started in maybe having a home lab, or started within IT or software engineering too?
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of getting started with a home lab, I mean, honestly, I would say first order of business, you can't go wrong with Proxmox.
Yeah,
It's a super lightweight virtualization stack. It'll run on a toaster. And then on top of that, I would just say, just always keep your ear to the ground for people that are getting rid of old technology. If it's a desktop, a micro PC, a laptop, just always be on the lookout because, again, in a home lab scenario, you can string together 5 laptops you got from a couple friends you knew that they were
yeah,
throwing out and turn it into a virtual server stack that runs, 40, 50 VMs without a problem, so
for
that's
sure.
that's
Yeah, I think
definitely a good
my
place to
first home
start.
lab was a broken laptop. The screen had cracked on it, and the hinge had broken, and so I just took the screen off and had it sitting there. And that was my first home lab. I had that for a couple years, and it worked great. And then I it's one of those hobbies that you just kind of keep going with, and it explodes a little bit sometimes too.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, but
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's a good one. So um,
Yeah. Luckily, when I went out and purchased my whole stack at the time, it was a business expense. So
hey,
I was like, you know
that's the
what? Let's
dream.
go with the
That's
all
the
flash
dream.
storage.
Yeah, nice. Nice. So then what do you like to virtualize? What are your kind of virtualization systems of choice within Proxmox? Are you just running it in containers? Are you running virtualized environments, or kind of what are you doing within Proxmox?
Yeah, everything's always I containerize everything for sure.
Okay.
Um, I tried playing around with LXC for a bit there, which is like the
Yeah.
Linux open Docker container alternative. Um, it's neat. It's fast. It skips the layer of virtualization I was injecting with running everything as a VM within Proxmox itself.
Hmm.
So it was super lightweight and fast. It's pretty nifty. Proxmox builds in support for LXC container support right out of the box, so it was quick and everything. But I just, from a security standpoint, I didn't like the idea of all these containers because I've got a knack of just pulling down, testing, and playing with stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't like the idea of all these containers basically sharing a kernel with my host OS right with
Hmm.
Proxmox. So I was like, I
We'll,
don't
we'll
like
make another
this.
little
So
virtual machine that is sandboxed. So yeah,
exactly. Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
nice.
Yeah. So I containerize everything.
Oh, cool. Very
Mhm.
cool. What's your distro of choice then? Are you a Debian guy since you like Proxmox, or what's your distro of choice?
What's funny is I am a Windows native. I've been a
Yeah.
Windows native my whole life. Now that's not to say I don't know my way around Linux. All
Hmm.
my servers are. I am a Debian guy. Debian is my default distro of choice. Um,
Good one. So,
yeah, entry point was Ubuntu, and I
yeah.
was like, you know what? There's just all this extra garbage packed in here. Went
Yeah.
upstream to Debian, and that's just kind of all I've run ever since. I played around briefly with Alma, Rocky, Rel, um, Cloud Linux, Amazon Linux, and a few others. And
Yeah.
I just like the Debian ecosystem.
I do too. That's what I ended up with is Debian after a similar trajectory after Ubuntu, and partially is because 99% of the commands are the same, so I didn't have to learn anything new.
Yep,
So it's like, yeah. And
yep.
I tried several others. It's like, that's, I remember that. Yeah, it's like yeah, say what you will about apt, but I remember the I remember the apt get command, and that's a muscle memory almost now. So
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
yeah, but well, cool.
Uh
Well,
huh.
is there any are there any resources that you use, podcasts or subreddits or communities that you use for your home lab, or kind of keeping your ear to the ground with the new technologies that are coming out?
I'm an avid podcast listener, and I'm always reading about, new and emerging technologies, new innovations with existing technologies, things of that nature. I've always got my ear to the ground for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, I've never really found a news outlet or a community source that I really felt like gave me a consistently good experience, or an experience that was in line with what I wanted out of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Really, my discovery of technology and home labbing and stuff like that has really kind of, my process for that's really been heading out to GitHub, just
Nice.
searching for topics, keywords, things I want to do or solve in my home lab, find solutions out there, sort by stars, and just kind of go from there, right? Evaluate repositories, see what these guys are offering. If I like it enough, give it a quick code review. If the code looks clean, give it a shot in my home lab, see how it plays, stuff like that. But yeah, news outlets and stuff, I tried the Reddit route. Comments or something else, man. I just,
there's a lot of noise you have to sift through on that.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. That's what I ran into, is just a lot of noise.
Yeah. It's like, I just want to solve this one problem.
Yep.
Well, I don't need people telling me that it's actually not a problem. Yeah. And then as far as podcasts or anything, do you listen to any kind of IT related podcast or self-hosted related podcasts?
IT or self-hosted?
You can say my podcast. That's fine too. Just go ahead. So.
Besides yours.
Yeah.
So like IT home lab related podcasts? No, not anymore. I do listen to a good bit of software engineering podcasts though.
Oh, very cool. And then I'll ask, the last question we got is, what are some trends or innovations that you saw? You're like, hey, I really want to try this out in my home lab. You mentioned GitHub Actions earlier, but some software, it's like, this is an interesting piece of software that's coming out. This is a new piece of technology. I want to try this out here, and maybe you use it somewhere later down the line, or kind of what are some innovations that you've kind of latched onto first in your home lab?
Interesting question. Okay. Let's see here. So the first one that immediately comes to mind is, HashiCorp Vault, right? Yeah. That was one that many years ago, right? I caught wind of it for use. I needed a vaulting solution with a problem I had to solve at the time. And HashiCorp Vault looked very intriguing to me. I took that and deployed that. That went to the home lab first, and I vetted that whole process out through home lab before I used it in production. That was a great example. GitHub Actions, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Man, I'm trying to think of it. There's other.
What's the file manager? We were talking the other day, and you said that you moved on
File Run.
Yeah.
File Run. Yeah. That's a really interesting file storage solution too. It's so for any of those that are not familiar out there, it's like basically a self-hosted like OneDrive, Google Drive type thing. Offers identical functionality, does all that stuff at the low price of $99 is a one-time purchase, and it's incredible. It's 1,000 times more lightweight and fast than Google Drive and all those other competitors, and even the self-hosted solutions like Nextcloud. It's way faster.
So now, does it use the Nextcloud client to transfer data? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Nice.
Yep. I did set it up like that, but I think it also supports. It supports like standard like WebDAV.
Okay.
I think it does SMB. I know it does NFS. There's a handful of other protocols it supports too, but yeah, I did use it with the Nextcloud client.
Oh, very cool. Mm-hmm. And then, how much raw storage do you have in your house? So.
Raw storage. So in my house, I have, I think 20 terabytes.
All right. Then how much is under your control? Then I guess that.
How much is under my control? Yeah. So across the on-prem, HQ here, and a couple cloud footprints I've got. I think it's somewhere around 60 terabytes right now.
That's impressive. That's a lot more than I have. Storage. I think that rocking like maybe 1 terabyte or so, and looking to be more like you every day, Anthony.
So. Hey, there's media hosting and stuff like that, right? Sure. 4K and 8K files are huge.
They are. They sure are. All those Blu-ray backups, at least.
That's it. Backups. Yep.
Well, good. Well, yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It was great talking to you. And
Yeah, it's great being on here. Thanks for asking me.
is there anywhere you want to send the people?
Geez. I mean, aside from the obvious, right? Check
Yeah.
out Automox.
Hey, perfect. That's what we wanted you to say.
That's it, man. That's it.
Right.
We just hit some major milestones with some new additions to third-party software.
Yeah.
Worklets, as you know, are growing out the wazoo. A lot of cool new features are coming out that I can't talk about right now, but a lot of really, really cool stuff is coming on the immediate horizon. So, yeah, excellent time to be an Automox customer, and an even better time to get into the Automox ecosystem.
Awesome. Well, automox.com for you then. So,
That's it, man. That's where to go. That's it.
all right. Well, thanks so much, Anthony, and we'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Landon. Have a good one.
All right, you too. So that's all we have for today. If you have a home lab, home server, or a fun project you've been working on, we'd love to hear about it in the Automox community. But until next time, find something to tinker with, a bunch of buttons to push, maybe even something to take apart and figure out how it works.